She climbed into the back of a stranger's supply wagon in a wedding dress, hid under a wool blanket, and whispered 4 words that changed both their lives. "Pretend I'm your wife." He didn't know her name. He didn't know what she was running from. All he knew was the sound of 6 riders searching the street behind him, and the fact that somebody hiding usually has a reason worth protecting. Wyoming Territory, 1887. What started as a lie to get out of town became the only true thing either of them had left by winter's end. Stick around, because the man chasing her isn't going to stop at the town line, and the storm coming down from the mountains that same night is going to test both of them a lot harder than any wedding ever could. Nathaniel Calloway had spent 3 hours in Larkspur Creek and was more than ready to leave it. Towns had never suited him. He'd grown up fluent in their particular currency, whose name opened which door, whose word carried weight and whose didn't, but that had been a different life. Before his brother died and left him a ranch 12 miles out and 4 years of practiced solitude. He'd gotten what he came for: flour, salt pork, ammunition, a new axe handle, blankets rated for a hard winter, and coffee that would stretch to March if he was careful. Larkspur Creek had what he needed, and nothing else he wanted. The town felt strung tight that morning, people moving the way people move when something is happening and they've decided, one way or another, not to be caught in it. He loaded the wagon, checked the harness, climbed up, and reached for the reins. That's when he heard it. A shift of fabric behind him in the covered section, someone repositioning against the wooden side. He climbed down, pulled back the canvas. A young woman sat wedged between the flour sacks and the blankets, knees drawn to her chest, a small bag clutched in both hands, and an expression fighting hard to stay composed. 22 maybe. Dark hair coming loose from its pins. A pale green dress, expensive, with a damp stain at the hem that said she'd been running through wet grass not long ago. Down the street he could already hear horses moving at the deliberate pace of men conducting a search. She leaned forward. "Pretend I'm your wife," she whispered. "Just until we're out of town." He looked at this stranger hiding in his flour and blankets. He didn't know her name, didn't know what she'd run from. He knew the particular sound of horses hunting for something, and he knew what it meant when a person hid from that sound. "Get down," he said. "Lie flat. Pull the blanket over you." She didn't argue. 3 riders came up from the north end of the street, thorough, not urgent. The unhurried search of men who have done this before and don't worry about outcomes, because the man who pays them makes outcomes go away. Nathaniel knew whose men they were before they reached him. Everyone in the county knew Silas Crane's riders, unremarkable men individually, but collectively marked by the particular ease of people whose authority is entirely borrowed and who have made their peace with that. The lead rider pulled up beside the wagon. "Morning, you ride in from the East Road, Calloway Ranch, 12 miles. See a young woman on your way in, dark hair. Green dress." Nathaniel had half a second to decide, and he spent it honestly. He didn't yet know why she was hiding. Which meant he didn't yet know whether handing her over was the right thing or the wrong one. Until he knew the burden sat with them, not her. "My wife's in the back," he said. "Poorly this morning. The road doesn't agree with her." The rider looked past him at the wagon. Nathaniel didn't look at the canvas. He held the man's eyes with the flat patience of someone who's answered honestly and is waiting for the next question. Behind the canvas, a small shift. Then Josephine Whitfield pulled the flap aside and looked out with the composed irritation of a woman who's unwell and being kept waiting. "Nathaniel," she said, landing his name the way you land a name you've used 1,000 times, "are we going or not?" "In a moment." He looked back at the rider. "Anything else?" The rider studied her, studied him, studied her again, and his eyes dropped to her feet. Cream-colored shoes with small pearl buttons, the kind meant for a church aisle, not a supply wagon. "Fine shoes for a sick woman," he said. Nathaniel moved the wagon before the sentence finished landing. "She dressed before she felt it coming on," he said, flat, unbothered, and flicked the reins, and the horse went because horses go. And they were moving before the rider had decided what to make of the answer. They let him get 30 seconds before he heard them again, not chasing. Following, which was worse because chasing has urgency and urgency burns out. Following has patience. He turned off at the tannery corner without signaling, cut through the alley behind the mercantile, and came out on the old timber road that ran parallel to Main Street and that nobody used in October because the ruts ran deep and the footing was a guess. The wagon held. He pushed the horse to a pace that wasn't comfortable but was sustainable, and 20 minutes on, the following sound was gone. He didn't stop. Josephine came forward and sat beside him on the box without asking permission. Her ruined shoes sat forgotten in her lap along with the small bag. "They'll take the main road," she said. "I know. That's why we're not on it." "Where does this one go?" "Eventually my ranch, longer way through the North Valley." She was quiet. Wyoming's October was in its last honest stretch, the aspens gone fully gold, the sky that thin hard blue that tells you winter's done waiting. "I should explain," she finally said. "You should." She looked at her hands. "My name is Josephine Whitfield. My mother was a seamstress in Larkspur Creek. She died in March. She left debts more than I knew existed." Silas Crane held the notes on most of them. "I know who Crane is." "Then you know what he wanted instead of the money." He kept his eyes on the road. "The wedding was today, this afternoon. At the Crane Ranch." A pause. "How long were you going to let me stay hidden back there?" "Until the town was behind us. And after that," she looked at the mountains ahead. "I hadn't gotten that far yet." He drove, she sat. The wagon rolled through the Wyoming afternoon, and neither of them spoke for a long stretch, and the silence didn't feel like something that needed fixing. She told him the rest across the first hour of mountain road, in pieces. The way things come out when the landscape has no audience and the person beside you isn't rushing you toward the next question. Crane had been in her mother's life since before she died, extending credit during a slow season, a hard winter, at rates that had seemed reasonable. The rates her mother reported to Josephine were the rates of a man doing a kindness. They were not the rates on the actual paper. Josephine had found that out 2 weeks earlier, going through her mother's things. "He didn't lend her money," she said. "He built a noose out of interest on interest, small debt turning into a mountain no seamstress could climb over. Until the only door left open was the one he'd built for her to walk through." What was he actually after? A strip of land on the south edge of town. "My grandfather's. There's a creek running through it." She looked at the peaks ahead. "Crane owns everything else on both banks. Without that piece, he can't get water rights to the section he's been expanding into." Nathaniel thought about a seamstress offered a kindness that had actually been a trap she couldn't see the shape of until it had already closed. "The land, is it yours now?" "It should be. My mother's will leaves it to me. Crane says the debt transfers with the estate and the property's the only thing worth enough to cover it." "I don't know law well enough to say if that's true." "It's not entirely true," he said. "The notes would have to name the property as collateral when they were written. I don't have the notes. I saw them. I didn't think to take them. My brother was a lawyer before this ranch," he said. "He used to say if you can get a thing in front of a federal marshal, Washington's paper still outweighs a cattle baron's word. Even out here." She looked at him like that mattered more than he understood. Behind them, on the main road, Crane's men were running the same math he was. The mountain passes would seal in 3 or 4 weeks, and his ranch sat on the far side of them. But the men behind them weren't going to be the worst thing that night. Something a great deal less patient than Silas Crane was already coming down out of the peaks. It arrived that evening the way Wyoming storms arrive, without the warning that might have actually been useful, with the flat authority of weather that has already decided. Nathaniel saw it building north and pushed the horse harder and didn't make the ranch. He made an old line cabin instead, used for summer grazing, 1 room, a stone hearth, wood already stacked outside from October habit. The foresight of a man who'd learned the mountains, didn't care about his plans. They got the horse into the lean-to, the wagon alongside it, and themselves inside. Josephine hadn't complained once on the road, not about the pace, the cold, the ruined shoes, or having eaten nothing since morning. She sat on the cabin's single chair and took inventory of the room with the look of someone finding it manageable. "There's food in the wagon," he said. I'll get it. "You have the fire." She went out into the storm and came back with salt pork, flour, coffee, 2 blankets, and had the meat cut and in the pan before he'd gotten the fire fully caught, which he noticed and didn't mention. They ate. The storm hammered the roof. He'd braced for something, questions, or the delayed shake of a morning that had asked a lot of her composure. What he got instead was a woman who finished her supper, cleaned the pan with the efficiency of someone who'd looked after herself a long time, and then looked at the fire. "Thank you for not asking questions on the road," she said. "You were telling me, on your own clock. My mother used to say the right person asks the right question at the right time," she said. "The wrong person asks all of them at once. What was the right question?" she never said. "I think she meant I'd know it when I heard it." He thought about a man who'd learned to stop asking questions in a house built for more than one person because there'd been no one left to ask. He looked at her across the fire. "Did you eat this morning?" "No, that was the right question 6 hours ago," he said. She almost smiled. It started, faltered, then finished, and it changed her whole face. He looked back at the fire because looking at her directly when she smiled like that was something he clearly needed to work up to. The storm broke by morning. They reached the ranch by noon. Josephine said nothing at first, just stood in the yard and looked at the house. Solid, well-kept, bigger than one man needed, a porch running its full front. A kitchen garden already put to bed for winter with the deliberate care of someone who expected it to produce again in April. "You did this yourself?" she asked, looking at the banked beds. "My brother planted it." "I keep it going. I'm sorry about your brother. 4 years ago," he said, not an answer to her sentence but an answer to something underneath it, and she took it that way. Without pushing further. He showed her the house, clean, ordered, the particular economy of a man who understood that disorder cost time he didn't have to spare. It was also missing the small adjustments that come from a second person's preferences settling into a space. She noticed. She didn't say anything. His brother's room, unused 4 years, is where she set her bag down. "I'll pay my keep," she said. "You don't have to." "I will. I'm not a guest. I'm someone staying till the pass opens, and while I'm here, I'll earn it." He held her look. She held his. "There's a mare in the east stall," he finally said. "Hurt her foreleg last week. Second pair of hands would help. I'll look at her in the morning." Her bag, unpacked, held a change of clothes, her mother's small Bible, a sewing kit, and 2 documents she'd managed to pull from her mother's papers before she ran, documents neither of them yet understood the weight of. The pass sealed on the 2nd of November. Josephine was at the Callaway Ranch for the winter, and it wasn't easy in the way people mean when they say a winter romance. It was 2 people in one house, work that didn't pause for weather, cattle needing feed, water needing breaking daily, wood needing splitting, tack needing mending. Some days neither said more than the work required. Some days conversation ran clean through supper into evening. She was good with the mare, which surprised him the way things surprise you when you've made an assumption without noticing you'd made one. She handled the injury with the focused patience of someone who actually understood animals, not someone unfamiliar improvising. "Your mother kept horses?" "My grandfather. I spent summers with him." The mare was sound again by December. Josephine also quietly and without announcement fixed things, the kitchen curtains torn at the hem since before he'd noticed, a section of loose porch railing, a split in the harness leather he'd been meaning to get to since September. She never told him when she'd done it, he'd just find it done. He started leaving notes, not letters, practical lines, the kind of conversation that works between 2 people whose days don't always overlap. "Wood on the north side needs another cord before February. Mare's leg is holding. Salt pork's out if you want it for supper." She answered the same way. "Curtains in your brother's room needed it too." Started on them. Found a loose stone in the east wall of the barn, mortared it, used the kit on the shelf. She'd been right. The ranch ran better with 2, not because she outworked him or reshaped his methods, but because a second presence changed the weight of the work itself. Gave it the feel of something being built instead of merely kept alive. Late January brought the first sign that Crane hadn't simply let the matter freeze over with the passes. A trapper named Higgins, the one man who still moved through the North Valley in deep winter on snowshoes, Stopped at the ranch with a message he'd been paid to carry and clearly didn't enjoy carrying. Crane had sent word to the Territorial Land Office in Cheyenne, filing a formal claim that the Whitfield Creek parcel was collateral on an estate debt, and requesting the office record it in Crane's name pending spring review. "He's trying to get it on paper before anybody can argue otherwise," Nathaniel said, reading the message twice by lamplight. "Can he do that? He can file it. Whether it holds depends on what your mother's actual notes said, and we don't have them." Josephine was quiet a long moment, staring at the fire the way she had that first night. "Then we need something that proves what the real terms were, not what he wrote down for the land office." "Sarah Wren," she said suddenly, "my mother's oldest friend, she still keeps a shop in town. My mother trusted her enough to leave her a set of household letters for safekeeping. I remember her saying it before she got sick. If Crane wrote anything to my mother directly about the real rates or bragged about the arrangement to anyone in writing, Sarah might have it." It took 2 more weeks and a break in the weather thin enough to risk the ride. Nathaniel went alone. Josephine wanted to go, and he wouldn't let her, not with Crane's men still watching the roads into town for exactly her face. He came back 3 days later with frostbite starting in 2 fingers and a small oilcloth packet Sarah Wren had kept folded inside a hymnal for 6 months, on the chance it would someday matter. Inside was a letter in Crane's own hand to a creditor in Cheyenne, instructing him on what rate to write on the seamstress's public ledger and what rate to actually collect. Proof, in Crane's own words, that the debt had been engineered from the start. Josephine held it that night by the fire, and for the first time since October, Nathaniel watched some of the fear finally leave her shoulders. "This is it," she said. "This is the thing that ends it. It's the thing that starts ending it," he said. "There's still a courtroom or a marshal or Crane deciding not to care what's true, but it's real," she said. "And real things hold. You told me that once." "I did," he said. "I still believe it." He came in February, not with restraint. 6 riders, Crane among them, arriving at mid-morning when the snow had settled, and the sky held that flat Wyoming white that means winter intends to stay a while longer. Nathaniel was at the barn when he heard them. He came out into the yard and didn't reach for the revolver first, because reaching for it first wasn't how he handled a situation he hadn't finished reading yet. Crane was 60, built like a man whose presence had once mattered on its own and had long since stopped needing to, because his money did the work now. "Calloway," he said, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The house door opened. Josephine stepped onto the porch and looked at Crane with the expression of a woman who'd spent a Wyoming winter mending curtains and nursing a lame mare and had arrived, finally, at the far side of being afraid of him. "Rosemary," Crane caught himself. "Josephine, come down." She didn't move. "Your claim," Nathaniel said, "was built on a debt manufactured to force exactly this outcome. You know it, and I know it. You have no standing here, Calloway. I have standing in anything happening on my property." He stepped forward between Crane's men and the porch. "She can have pretended to be my wife to get clear of that town," he said. "But she will never need to pretend one thing in this house." Crane's patience, 30 years of winning arguments through the weight of his position rather than the strength of his logic, didn't crack yet. "This is not your situation, Calloway. She's on my land. That makes it exactly my situation." "You're one man," Crane said. "He isn't," said a voice from the road. 3 riders from the valley had come up unannounced, Tom Hargrove from the eastern spread, the Marsh brothers from the north, men who'd seen 6 riders moving through the snow together and drawn the obvious conclusion about what that meant, and had decided to be nearby for it. Crane looked at them, looked at his own men who wore the particular expression of employees quietly recalculating whether the job was worth the afternoon, looked back at Josephine. She came down the porch steps and drew a folded paper from inside her collar, worn soft at the creases from months of being carried and reread. 22 years old, 4 months in a house with a man who left notes on a kitchen table and never once asked her for more than she was ready to give, and done, finally, being afraid of Sela's Crane. "You're right about one thing," she said, voice shaking slightly, eyes steady. "I don't have your original notes." She held the paper up so the light caught it. "But I have your letter to the creditor in Cheyenne, telling him what rate to write down and what rate to actually collect. And Sarah Wren has a copy already on its way to the territorial marshal." The Reverend helped her write what goes with it. Crane went very still. He looked at his riders. He looked at the valley men on the road. He looked at Nathaniel, unmoved from between him and the porch, and at Josephine, and the paper steady in her hand. And he read, in the particular way of a man whose whole authority rests on other people's willingness to comply, that the compliance was ending in real time. One rider had already eased his horse a step sideways, putting distance between himself and the center of it. "This isn't finished," Crane said. "Yes," Nathaniel said. "It is." Crane turned his horse. His men followed, not all together, but in the manner of men choosing a direction and discovering it wasn't the one they'd been pointing. The yard went quiet. Tom called over, "Everything all right, Calloway?" "Yes," Nathaniel said. "Thank you." Josephine stood beside him, the letter still trembling faintly in her hand, not from cold. "He'll go to the marshal first," she said, "before the marshal comes to him. Let him." "Will it hold?" "It'll hold," Nathaniel said, "because it's true." True things hold. He said it that evening, not dramatically, because it wasn't that kind of evening. It was the kind that comes after a hard day, when the hard part is finally over, the house is warm, supper is done, and the specific quiet of two people who have been through something together settles into the room. She sat with her mother's Bible, reading the way you read something that carries a person you loved inside it. He sat across from her. "Pass opens in April," he said. "Yes, I can take you anywhere you need to go once it does, any city, anywhere you want to start over. The marshal will see the property returns to you clean. You could sell it or keep it. Either way, you'd have something to build from." She held the Bible in both hands. "Is that what you're planning? Take me somewhere in April?" He looked at the table. "I can take you anywhere," he said. "I just don't know how I'd come back to this house if you weren't in it." She went very still. She looked at him with the same brown eyes that had been calculating danger and safety since October, and had, somewhere across the winter, stopped calculating and started knowing. "Nathaniel," she said, "I fixed the curtains in your brother's room, I know, and the porch railing, I know, and I've been leaving you notes on that kitchen table for 4 months, I know," he said. "Because I live here," she said. He looked at her. She held his gaze with the certainty of a woman who'd spent a winter arriving at something and had finally arrived. "I live here," she said again, quieter, not a question, not even a statement about the present, a statement about intention. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers, both of them still resting against her mother's Bible. She held it back. "Yes," he said, "you do." They married in May. The pass had opened the 3rd week of April and brought the whole world back with it, green rushing through everything, the creek running high with snowmelt, the aspens moving from bare branches to their first pale leaf. They rode into Larkspur Creek in the same wagon, the same road, the same covered section in back, carrying, this time, an actual wedding dress Sarah Wren had made. Simple, cream-colored. Josephine hadn't wanted something to only look at. She'd wanted something she could live a life in, practical enough to wear out to the garden or out to check on a mare right after the vows were said. The town had changed since February. Silas Crane had left the territory in March, once the marshal's investigation confirmed what Sarah Wren's letter had shown. He left quietly, the way men do when their authority evaporates the moment its actual source gets pulled out from under it. His holdings went into assessment for back taxes and disputed claims that would occupy the county for a long while yet. The small church was full. Sarah Wren sat in the front pew with the look of a woman who'd kept a secret in a drawer for 6 months on the chance it would matter, and had been proven right for the keeping. Josephine's creek parcel, her grandfather's land, her mother's inheritance, had come back to her under clear title that April. She decided not to sell it. She walked the aisle in the cream dress toward a man who'd found her in his wagon, driven the wrong road on purpose through a mountain storm, left her notes on a kitchen table all winter, stood between her and 6 riders in his own yard, and told her she'd never need to pretend anything again in his house. She thought about a whispered request in a covered wagon back in October. She'd asked him to pretend he never had, not once, not the road he chose, not the protection he offered, not the notes. Not his hand over hers by the fire in February. None of it had been an act. Afterward in the churchyard, Sarah Wren appeared at her side while Nathaniel talked with Tom Hargrove nearby. "Your mother," Sarah said, "would have found a way to make this happen sooner. She'd have left him more notes," Josephine said. They laughed. From across the yard, Nathaniel watched his wife laughing in the Wyoming spring and thought, "I found her in my wagon. I drove the wrong road. I came home." He crossed the yard and took her hand. She held it, and the Wyoming May stood around them, green and enormous and only just beginning. The following October, almost exactly 1 year from the day she'd climbed into the back of his wagon, Josephine stood in the same kitchen garden Nathaniel's brother had first laid out. Banking the beds with straw for a winter she now knew by heart, when the frost usually came, which rows needed the thickest cover. How long the mare liked to be walked before the first real cold set in. She was, by then, keeping her own ledger of the ranch's accounts alongside her mother's old sewing books, the two kinds of work sitting side by side on the same shelf. The creek parcel in town had become a small, second income, leased in the spring to a family of new arrivals for grazing rights, at rates Josephine set herself, in writing, witnessed, with every number where anyone could see it. She had made certain of that. She would always make certain of that. Nathaniel found her there at dusk, the same time of evening the first storm had once caught them on the mountain road. He didn't say much, he rarely did, still, but he stood beside her and looked out at the garden, the mended curtains visible through the kitchen window behind them, the porch railing that had held steady since February. "You're thinking about the wagon," she said without looking up. "I'm thinking about the 4 words you said to me in it. Pretend I'm your wife," she said. "I remember, you never had to," he said. "Not for 1 day since." She straightened, brushed the straw from her hands, and looked at him, the same steady brown eyes, no longer calculating danger, no longer needing to. "No," she said. "I never did." They stood together as the light went out of the valley, the same mountains that had once hidden a storm now simply standing there, quiet, holding nothing over either of them anymore. What started as a lie whispered in fear became, within a single winter, the truest thing either of them had ever built. Not because of a wedding and not because of a letter that brought down a powerful man, but because of 100 small, unremarkable choices, a note left on a table, a question asked at the right time instead of all at once, a hand offered across a fire before either of them had the words for what it meant. Some things begin as survival. Given enough winters, they become a life.